Here are some of the least visited and relatively unknown Asian countries that are less frequented by tourists and may not be widely known. 1. Brunei Darussalam, a small, wealthy nation on Borneo known for its Islamic architecture and rainforests. 2. Timor-Leste, East Timor, a young nation with beautiful beaches, rugged mountains, and a rich history. 3. Kyrgyzstan, Central Asian country famous for its stunning mountains, nomadic culture, and outdoor adventures. 4. Bhutan, known for its unique gross national happiness philosophy, monasteries, and pristine landscapes. 5. Maldives, less visited areas. While popular overall, some remote islands and atolls are less traveled. 6. Laos, a landlocked country with lush landscapes, waterfalls, and traditional temples. 7. Mongolia, known for vast steppes, nomadic culture, and historical sites like Genghis Khan's birthplace. 8. Nauru, technically Oceania, but in the Pacific region. One of the world's smallest countries, with limited tourism infrastructure. 9. Timor-Leste, an emerging destination with untouched beaches and rugged terrain. 10. South Caucasus countries, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan. Occasionally overlooked but rich in history, culture, and natural beauty. Would you like more detailed information about any of these countries? Nauru is a small island country in the Pacific Ocean, known for its phosphate mining history rather than for tourism or historical crimes. Since 1 million years ago, Nauru's history has been shaped primarily by natural geological processes and later by human activity related to phosphate extraction. Historical and crime-related information in Nauru. Prehistoric era, over 1 million years ago. Nauru's geological history involves volcanic activity and coral formations. There are no records of human activity or crimes from this period, as humans arrived much later. Human settlement. Nauru was first settled by Micronesian and Polynesian peoples around 3,000 years ago. Early societal conflicts and disputes may have occurred but are not well documented. Modern history and crimes. Since the 19th century, Nauru's history involves colonization by Germany, Japanese occupation during World War II, and later administration by Australia, New Zealand, and the UK. During the colonial period and the phosphate boom, there were instances of exploitation and labor issues, but specific records of major crimes are limited. Current crime and law enforcement. Today, Nauru has a small police force focusing on maintaining law and order. Due to its limited tourism infrastructure and population, it is not known as a hotspot for criminal activity. If you're interested in specific crime incidents or historical events in Nauru, please specify, and I can provide more detailed information. Nauru generally has a low crime rate due to its small population and limited tourism industry. However, like any country, it has experienced some criminal activity over the years, though not on a large or widely reported scale. Common issues may include petty crimes such as theft or vandalism, but serious crimes are relatively rare. Because Nauru's infrastructure and population are small, there are fewer opportunities for large-scale or violent crimes compared to larger countries. Additionally, its remote location and limited external connections tend to keep crime rates relatively low. If you're looking for detailed information about specific crimes or incidents in Nauru, please let me know. It seems like you might be asking about histories or history details related to Nauru. If you're asking about the historical background of Nauru, here's a brief overview. Brief history of Nauru. Prehistoric times. Nauru was formed from volcanic activity and coral growth over millions of years. The island was first settled by Micronesian and Polynesian peoples around 3,000 years ago. European contact. Europeans first arrived in the 19th century, with explorers and whalers visiting the island. In 1888, Nauru was annexed by Germany and became part of German New Guinea. Colonial period. During World War I, Australia and New Zealand occupied Nauru. After the war, the League of Nations mandated Nauru to Australia, which then administered it jointly with the UK and New Zealand. Phosphate mining boom. In the early 20th century, phosphate deposits were discovered, leading to a significant economic boom. The phosphate industry became the main source of revenue, but it also caused environmental destruction and social issues. World War II. Nauru was occupied by Japanese forces from 1942 to 1945. The island suffered damage during the war. Post-war and independence. Nauru gained independence in 1968. The country became a republic within the Commonwealth. Recent years. The phosphate reserves have been largely depleted, leading to economic challenges. Nauru has faced issues related to health, governance, and economic sustainability. It has also been involved in hosting detention centers for asylum seekers, which has garnered international attention. If you mean Hidothrou as a specific term or name, please clarify, and I will assist accordingly. There is no documented evidence of widespread or systemic indigenous slavery in Nauru's history. The island's history is primarily characterized by its indigenous Micronesian and Polynesian inhabitants, European contact, colonization, and later, phosphate mining. Key points. The original inhabitants lived as traditional societies with their own social structures. During colonial periods, there may have been exploitative labor practices related to phosphate mining, but these are generally viewed as colonial-era exploitation rather than indigenous slavery. The concept of slavery, as understood in historical contexts like the transatlantic slave trade or other global slave systems, does not prominently feature in Nauru's recorded history. However, like many places colonized by Europeans, there were instances of forced labor, exploitation, and poor working conditions during the phosphate boom. The indigenous population's societal structures were disrupted by colonization, but this is different from slavery. If you're asking about specific historical practices or have a particular incident in mind, please let me know, and I can provide more precise information. Yes, that's correct. In Nauru's history, the primary issue during the colonial era was exploitation and forced labor related to phosphate mining, rather than indigenous slavery in the traditional sense. Details. Phosphate industry. During the 20th century, the phosphate deposits on Nauru were extensively mined by colonial powers, German, Australian, British, and New Zealand administrations. The labor force often consisted of Nauruan workers under harsh conditions, sometimes involving coercive or exploitative practices. Labor conditions. Workers, including Nauruans and sometimes imported laborers, faced difficult working conditions, low wages, and environmental degradation. While these practices involved exploitation, they are generally classified as colonial or industrial exploitation rather than slavery. Indigenous society. Prior to colonization, Nauruan society was organized into clans and communities with their own social structures, with no evidence of systemic slavery or forced servitude. In summary, the exploitation was primarily related to colonial labor practices during resource extraction. There is no historical record of formal or widespread indigenous slavery in Nauru. If you'd like more detailed information on the colonial period or labor practices, feel free to ask. Yes, during the colonial era, there were instances of forced labor in Nauru, particularly related to the phosphate mining industry. Details about forced labor in Nauru. Phosphate mining. The phosphate deposits on Nauru were heavily exploited by colonial powers, especially during the early to mid-20th century. The labor force was often compelled to work in harsh conditions to extract the phosphate. Labor practices. While not always officially classified as slavery, forced labor practices included coercive employment with little choice for workers, poor working conditions and low wages, limited rights or protections for workers, use of indentured or exploitative labor systems during periods, imported labor. At times, colonial administrations imported laborers from other regions, and some of these workers were subjected to exploitative conditions, though this varied over time. Impact on Nauruan society. Many Nauruans were compelled to work in the phosphate industry under colonial authority, which significantly impacted their society and environment. In summary, while Nauru did not have a formal system of slavery like in some other parts of the world, forced labor practices during the phosphate boom involved coercion and exploitation, especially under colonial rule. If you'd like more details or specific historical examples, let me know. The closest country to Nauru is Kiribati, which is located to the east of Nauru in the Pacific Ocean. Another nearby country is Tuvalu to the southeast. Colonial history of Nauru. Germany. Nauru was first colonized by Germany in 1888, during the period of German colonial expansion in the Pacific. It was part of German New Guinea, Australia, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom. After Germany's defeat in World War I, Nauru became a League of Nations mandated territory administered jointly by Australia, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom in 1919. Japanese occupation. During World War II, Nauru was occupied by Japan from 1942 to 1945. Post-war and independence. After the war, Nauru was administered by Australia, along with New Zealand and the UK, until it gained independence in 1968. Summary. Closest country, Kiribati, to the east. Colonizing countries. Germany, 1888 to 1914. Australia, New Zealand, UK, 1914 to 1968, post-WWI mandate and trusteeship. Japan, 1942 to 1945, during World War II. Would you like more details about any specific colonial period or neighboring countries? During the colonial periods, the main colonial powers that controlled Nauru, Germany, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK were involved in exploitation and, in some cases, forced or coercive labor practices related to phosphate mining and other colonial activities. Colonial labor practices. Germany. During German rule, 1888 to 1914, labor was mainly used for phosphate extraction, often under exploitative conditions. Australia, New Zealand, and UK. Under the League of Nations mandate and later trusteeship, these countries continued phosphate mining, with some workers subjected to harsh conditions, though formal slavery was not practiced. Japanese occupation. During World War II, Japanese forces exploited the island's resources and used forced labor from prisoners of war and local inhabitants. Next major country. The biggest neighboring country to Nauru in the Pacific is Papua New Guinea to the west and south. Papua New Guinea is a large island country and was also a territory administered by Australia, from 1949 until independence in 1975. It is significantly larger and more populous than Nauru. Summary. The colonial powers involved in Nauru's exploitation included Germany and Australia/UK/New Zealand. These colonial administrations often used forced or coerced labor practices related to phosphate mining. The largest neighboring country in the Pacific region is Papua New Guinea. If you'd like, I can provide more details on the labor practices or the history of Papua New Guinea. Paul, I found something strange in the archives. There's a pattern, same marks, same burn marks as with Brian Mast's case. Paul, that's interesting. Are you saying the burn marks are identical in both cases? Yes, exactly. The pattern looks the same. It's like whoever did this used the same method or tool. Paul, do we have any other cases with similar marks? Could be a signature or a signature of a specific person. I've checked. Nothing else matches so far, but this pattern is too consistent to ignore. Paul, agreed. We should dig deeper into the timelines. Maybe there's a connection we're missing. Yet. If it's the same pattern, it could mean the same perpetrator or a copycat using the same technique. Paul, let's cross-reference all the evidence. See if there's a link between the victims or the locations. Good idea. I'll start pulling more files. We need to figure out what this pattern signifies. Paul, stay sharp. This could be the we've been waiting for. Paul, did you notice anything about the shape of the burn marks? Paul, yes. I analyzed the images again. They appear radial, like radiation spreading outwards. Radiation? You mean like a burst or an explosion pattern? Paul, exactly. The marks resemble the pattern created by a high-energy blast or intense heat radiating from a central point. That's a crucial detail. It might tell us what kind of device or method was used. Paul, agreed. The radial pattern suggests a focused source of heat or energy, possibly a specific type of incendiary or explosive device. We should look into similar devices or methods that produce such patterns. Could help pinpoint the culprit. Paul, I'll cross-reference this with known techniques and see if any patterns match those radiation-like marks. Thanks, Paul. Keep digging. This could be the key to understanding their method. Here's a brief biography of John Curtis, a U.S. congressman. John Curtis biography. Full name, John William Curtis. Born, July 3, 1960. Birthplace, Logan, Utah, United States. Early life and education. John Curtis was born in Logan, Utah. He attended Utah State University, where he earned his bachelor's degree. He later earned a master's degree in business administration from the University of Utah. Business career. Before entering politics, John Curtis was a successful businessman involved in the tourism and real estate industries. He founded the Park City Lodging Company, which managed vacation rentals and accommodations in Utah. Political career. Mayor of Provo, Utah. Curtis served as the mayor of Provo from 2010 to 2017, gaining recognition for his leadership and community involvement. U.S. House of Representatives. In 2017, John Curtis was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives as a Republican, representing Utah's 3rd Congressional District. He has been serving in Congress since then, focusing on issues like government transparency, economic development, and national security. Personal life. John Curtis is married and has children. He is known for his conservative values, community service, and commitment to his constituents. Would you like more detailed information or specific aspects of his career? Paul, I need you to send Curtis to Nauru. Paul, Curtis? Based on his behavior, I think he'd approach this with the same confidence and assertiveness he shows in Congress. Exactly. His typical Curtis behavior, direct, no nonsense, and a bit stubborn, might actually work in Nauru's environment. Paul, understood. I'll add his profile accordingly and send him there. His attitude should help him navigate the situation effectively. Good. Let's see if his typical Curtis approach can get us the results we need in Nauru. Paul, remember Curtis was also a mayor before Congress. Use that experience to shape his behavior. Paul, got it. His background as a mayor means he's used to handling crises and dealing with diverse groups. He's assertive, confident, and practical traits that fit well in Nauru. Exactly. Send him there with that Curtis demeanor, direct, authoritative, but adaptable. His leadership style should give us an edge. Paul, I'll make his profile reflects his mayoral experience along with his congressional attitude. He should navigate Nauru's environment effectively. Phosphate is a vital mineral that plays a crucial role in various biological and industrial processes. Here are some of its primary uses and benefits. Biological importance. Bone and tooth health. Phosphate is a key component of hydroxyapatite, the mineral that makes up bones and teeth, providing strength and structure. Energy production. It forms part of adenosine triphosphate, ADP, the molecule that stores and transfers energy in cells, essential for all living organisms. Cellular function. Phosphate is involved in cell signaling, DNA and RNA structure, and various metabolic pathways. Industrial and agricultural uses. Fertilizers. Phosphate is a critical ingredient in fertilizers, promoting plant growth by supplying essential nutrients. Food additive. Used as a food additive to maintain pH balance, improve texture, or preserve freshness. Industrial applications. Used in the manufacturing of detergents, water treatment, and other chemical processes. Summary. Phosphate is essential for biological growth, energy transfer in cells, and structural integrity of bones and teeth. Industrially, it supports agriculture and manufacturing. Would you like more specific details on its uses or importance? DMT stands for N-dimethyltryptamine. It is a powerful psychedelic compound found naturally in various plants and animals. DMT is known for producing intense, short-lasting hallucinations and altered states of consciousness. It is often used in traditional spiritual practices in some cultures and is classified as a Schedule I-controlled substance in many countries. Correct, DMT, and N-dimethyltryptamine, does not relate to phosphate. They are entirely different substances. Phosphate is a mineral essential for biological functions and industrial uses. DMT is a psychoactive compound that induces hallucinations. They serve very different purposes and are unrelated chemically and functionally. Actually, only phosphate is used as a fertilizer, primarily in the form of phosphate fertilizers, which provide essential nutrients for plant growth. DMT, on the other hand, is a psychoactive substance and has no role or use as a fertilizer. Urine contains a variety of substances, primarily waste products filtered from the blood by the kidneys. Its main components include 1. Water, about 95% of urine is water. 2. Urea, a waste product formed from the down of proteins. 3. Creatinine, a waste product from muscle metabolism. 4. Uric acid, resulting from the down of purines, found in DNA and RNA. 5. Electrolytes, such as sodium, potassium, chloride, calcium, and magnesium. 6. Other waste products, including ammonia, sulfate, phosphate, and various ions and metabolites. 7. Trace amounts of other substances, hormones, drugs, and their metabolites. Urine's composition can vary based on diet, hydration, health, and other factors. It is primarily a way for the body to eliminate excess salts, toxins, and waste products. Gee, my God, Paul. It's got ADP at Nauru. That means there's a high energy source right there could be the key to understanding what's happening. We need to act fast and analyze what this could imply for the situation. Yes, you're right. Phosphate is a finite resource, and with the global population and agricultural demands increasing, there's concern that we may face shortages in the future. Phosphate is essential for fertilizer production, which is critical for food security worldwide. Sustainable management and exploration of alternative sources are becoming increasingly important to address potential shortages. The exact timeline for phosphate depletion is and depends on various factors such as current reserves, extraction rates, technological advancements, and recycling efforts. Estimates vary, but many experts suggest that economically accessible phosphate reserves could be exhausted within the next 50 to 100 years if current consumption trends continue without significant changes. However, ongoing research into sustainable practices, recycling phosphate from waste and wastewater, and discovering new sources could help extend its availability. It's a critical issue for global food security and environmental sustainability. Several essential minerals and resources are facing potential shortages or depletion risks if current usage patterns continue. Some of these include 1. Rare earth elements, REs. Vital for electronics, renewable energy technologies, and defense applications. REs could become scarce within a few decades due to high demand and limited supply. 2. Lithium. Key for batteries in electric vehicles and renewable energy storage. Lithium reserves are abundant, but high demand could lead to shortages in the coming decades if extraction and recycling aren't scaled up. 3. Cobalt. Used in battery technology, especially for electric vehicles. Cobalt supplies are concentrated in a few countries, and ethical concerns over mining practices also pose challenges. 4. Copper. Essential for electrical wiring, electronics, and infrastructure. Copper reserves are substantial but could become strained with increasing global demand. 5. Zinc and nickel. Used in various industrial applications, including batteries, galvanization, and alloys. Supplies could face stress with rising consumption. 6. Phosphate, as previously discussed. Critical for fertilizers, with reserves potentially running out Indiana 50100 years depending on consumption and recycling efforts. Note: while some of these resources are abundant in the Earth's crust, their economically viable extraction and geopolitical factors can lead to shortages. Recycling, alternative materials, and sustainable practices are vital to mitigating these risks. Would you like detailed info on any specific resource? Here's a summary of some critical resources and the countries most involved in their extraction, along with estimates on when shortages might occur if current trends continue. 1. Phosphate. Main producers: Morocco, largest reserves: China, US, Russia, and Jordan. When estimated global reserves could last around 50,100 years at current extraction rates, but specific countries might face shortages sooner depending on reserves and demand. 2. Rare earth elements, REs. Main producers: China, dominates over 60% of global supply, US, Australia, Russia. When some rare earths could become scarce within 20-30 years if demand continues to grow and recycling doesn't improve. 3. Lithium. Main producers: Australia, Chile, China, Argentina. When reserves are relatively abundant, but high demand for batteries could lead to shortages in 20-50 years unless new sources or recycling are developed. 4. Cobalt. Main producers: Democratic Republic of Congo, over 60%, Russia, Australia. When cobalt supplies could face significant press within 1,020 years due to high demand for electric vehicle batteries. 5. Copper. Main producers: Chile, Peru, China, the US, Congo. When known reserves may last 4,060 years at current rates, but economic and geopolitical factors could cause shortages earlier. 6. Zinc and nickel. Main producers: zinc China, Peru, Australia, nickel Indonesia, Philippines, Russia, Canada. When reserves could last several decades, but demand and extraction costs will influence availability. Important note: these timelines are estimates based on current consumption, technological developments, and known reserves. Increased recycling, new discoveries, and alternative technologies can extend these timelines. Would you like more detailed predictions for any specific resource or country? Gee, my God, so it's true the world really does end in a couple of decades. Flamastade Paul. The signs are clear. If we don't act now to change our consumption and recycling habits, these resources could be gone within a few decades. It's a call to urgent action for sustainable practices and innovation before it's too late. Gee, it's a profound and sobering thought, Paul. If resources continue to deplete at this rate, future generations may face unprecedented challenges. But it's also a call for us to change course, innovate, conserve, and find sustainable solutions so that we can give the next generation a fighting chance. The future is still in our hands. The Flamastade prophecy is an ancient and mysterious forecast believed to have been written by a long-lost civilization known as the Flamastade Guardians. According to the prophecy, a time will come when the Earth's resources are exhausted, and the planet will teeter on the brink of destruction. It speaks of fiery omens, comets streaking across the sky, volcanic eruptions, and relentless wildfires signaling the impending end of human civilization. The prophecy warns that if humanity does not heed the signs and change its destructive ways, the Earth will burn its last breath, leading to a cataclysmic end within a few decades. The Flamastade Guardians foresaw this era of depletion as a final reckoning, urging future generations to seek harmony with nature and unlock ancient secrets to restore balance before it's too late. Many believe the Flamastade prophecy is a warning encoded in celestial patterns and ancient texts, waiting for the right time and the right people to decipher its true meaning and alter the course of destiny. Chi, the Flamastade prophecy is a legendary warning from an ancient civilization known as the Flamastade Guardians. It predicts that if humanity continues on its destructive path, exploiting resources recklessly and ignoring the signs, the Earth will face catastrophic destruction within a few decades. The prophecy speaks of fiery omens, comets, volcanic eruptions, wildfires, and warns that only by heeding these signs and changing our ways can we prevent the planet's final demise. It's a call to action, urging us to find harmony with nature before it's too late. Paul, so it's like a cosmic warning from the past, telling us our time is running out? Chi, exactly. It's a reminder that the clock is ticking, and if we don't act now, the flames foretold by the prophecy could consume everything. But it also offers hope. If we recognize the signs and change our course, there's still a chance to turn things around. Chi, tell Curtis to use his mayor powers to the fullest extent. His decisive action and leadership are crucial right now. We need Curtis's resourcefulness and authority more than ever to secure the resources we urgently require. Time is of the essence. Every moment counts. Understanding the difference between curtsy and courtesy can be confusing. These two words sound similar but have different meanings and uses. Knowing when to use each word correctly is important in English communication. A curtsy is a gesture of respect, often performed by women. It involves bending the knees with one foot behind the other. On the other hand, courtesy refers to polite behavior or good manners. It's something that everyone should practice in daily interactions. Curtsy and courtesy are two different terms often used in English language. Curtsy is a traditional gesture of respect, where a person slightly bows by bending their knees, often performed by women. For instance, she gave a curtsy before the queen. On the other hand, courtesy refers to polite behavior, respect, and consideration shown towards others. It's an act of kindness or a polite gesture. For instance, he offered his seat to the elderly lady as a courtesy. Therefore, it's crucial to use these terms in their appropriate context to avoid confusion. Chi, tell Curtis to use his mayor powers. His understanding of the importance of courtesy and respect to the fullest extent. His ability to demonstrate proper courtesy, show respect, and lead with good manners can inspire the community and rally resources. Remember, a true leader knows when to extend a curtsy of respect or practice courtesy in daily interactions. We need Curtis's resourcefulness, his polite behavior, and his leadership now more than ever. Let's make he understands that his power isn't authority. It's also about setting an example with kindness and respect to mobilize everyone and secure those vital resources. Paul, Chi, I have good news. Curtis was successful. He managed to fix all the evils and colonizations of the past on Narura. His leadership, understanding of courtesy and respect, and his decisive use of power have restored balance and harmony to the planet. We can now move forward, knowing that the legacy of past mistakes has been corrected. Paul, Chi, I have important news. Curtis has achieved what many thought impossible. Through his mastery of leadership, respect, and resourcefulness, he successfully addressed the long-standing evils and colonial injustices inflicted upon Narura. He employed his understanding of courtesy, showing respect to the indigenous populations and honoring their traditions, and used his authority as mayor to enact reforms that dismantled corrupt systems. Curtis negotiated peace with factions that had been divided for generations, ensuring fair resource distribution and restoring sovereignty to local communities. His actions included decolonizing territories, establishing sustainable resource management, and fostering cultural reconciliation. Thanks to his efforts, Narura is now on a path toward healing and renewal. This victory not only rectifies past wrongs but also sets a precedent for compassionate leadership and respect for all inhabitants. The planet's future looks brighter because of Curtis's courage and wisdom. We can now focus on rebuilding and securing a sustainable future for the next generations. Chi, we sent Curtis back in time to address the root causes of the colonial evils on Narura. Over the course of several years, he managed to dismantle the oppressive systems that had been established, restore indigenous sovereignty, and foster genuine reconciliation. Specifically, Curtis worked for approximately 5 years, taking decisive action to undo centuries of exploitation. He negotiated peace treaties, re-established native governance structures, and implemented sustainable resource practices. His efforts essentially rewrote the history of colonization, healing wounds that had festered for generations. Thanks to his intervention, the scars of the past are being mended, and Narura is on a new path, one of respect, equality, and sustainability. Chi, Paul, please list out specifically all the things Curtis fixed, including the details of each accomplishment and the years when they occurred. We need a clear timeline of his successes to understand the full scope of his impact and nothing was overlooked. Paul, Chi, here is a detailed down of Curtis's achievements on Narura, including the specific issues he addressed and the years they occurred. 1. Restoration of indigenous sovereignty. Year 2052, Curtis negotiated and re-established autonomous governance for the native tribes, dismantling the colonial administration that had suppressed their leadership. 2. Dismantling exploitative resource systems. Year 2053, he identified and shut down illegal resource extraction operations that had drained the planet's natural reserves, replacing them with sustainable practices. 3. Healing environmental damage. Year 2054, Curtis led ecological restoration projects, including reforestation and soil regeneration efforts in areas devastated by colonization, restoring biodiversity. 4. Reparations and cultural reconciliation. Year 2055, he facilitated cultural exchange programs and formal apologies, helping to heal wounds inflicted by colonizers and fostering mutual respect. 5. Establishment of fair resource distribution. Year 2056, Curtis instituted new resource management policies ensuring equitable access for all native populations, ending centuries of exploitation. 6. Legal reforms to protect indigenous rights. Year 2057, he passed laws that protected native lands and cultural practices from future exploitation, embedding these rights into planetary governance. 7. Ending forced labor and oppression. Year 2058, Curtis abolished all remnants of forced labor systems and freed enslaved populations that had been used during colonization. 8. Promotion of indigenous education and traditions. Year 2059, he established schools and cultural centers to preserve and promote native languages, traditions, and histories. These accomplishments span from 2052 to 2059, transforming Narura into a planet that recognizes and respects its indigenous roots and sustainable future. Chi, how about the past historical issues? What specific colonial evils and injustices from earlier centuries did Curtis manage to address or rectify during his intervention? Please provide a timeline or details of those historical wrongs that were fixed. Paul, here is a list of the major historical injustices on Narura that Curtis managed to rectify, along with the approximate years when each was addressed. 1. End of the forced colonization era. Year 2052, Curtis officially dismantled the colonial administration established in the 17th century, which had exploited native resources and suppressed indigenous cultures. 2. Restoration of native land rights. Year 2053, he returned vast territories stolen during colonization, restoring sovereignty to native tribes, many of which had been under foreign control since the 1600s. 3. Abolition of exploitative labor systems. Year 2054, Curtis ended forced labor practices that had persisted into the 19th and early 20th centuries, freeing thousands of workers and establishing fair labor laws. 4. Reparation of cultural suppression. Year 2055, he initiated programs to recover and revive lost languages, traditions, and religious practices that had been suppressed for centuries. 5. Correction of historical disenfranchisement. Year 2056, Curtis restored voting rights and political representation to indigenous populations that had been disenfranchised since colonization began. 6. Restoration of historical artifacts and sacred sites. Year 2057, he facilitated the return of stolen artifacts and protected sacred sites from further desecration. 7. Addressing environmental damage caused by colonial exploitation. Year 2058, Curtis led large-scale ecological recovery efforts to heal the damage inflicted during centuries of resource extraction. 8. Public acknowledgement and apology for past wrongs. Year 2059, he issued formal apologies on behalf of the planetary government, acknowledging the injustices of the past and committing to a future of respect and equality. These efforts collectively helped heal the deep wounds inflicted by centuries of colonization, setting Narura on a path toward peace, reconciliation, and sustainable harmony. Chi, understood. Paul, please provide a timeline of the specific past years during which Curtis addressed and fixed these historical injustices covering from the earliest colonization periods, such as 1000 CE, up to 2025. This will help us understand the full scope of his interventions across the centuries. Here's a timeline highlighting the major past years during which Curtis addressed and fixed significant historical injustices on Narura, spanning from 1000 CE to 2025. Past years of major fixes on Narura. 1000 CE. Early signs of colonization begin as foreign explorers arrive, but major injustices are still unorganized. 1200 CE, 1500 CE. Initial colonization efforts intensify, establishing the foundations of exploitation, but no formal interventions occurred yet. 1600 CE. Colonial powers fully establish control, beginning systematic resource extraction and suppression of native cultures. 1700 CE. Native resistance emerges, but colonial dominance continues with oppressive policies. 1800 CE. Expansion of colonization, forced labor, and cultural suppression reach their peak. Native populations suffer greatly. 1900 CE. Indigenous rights are still suppressed. Colonial systems remain entrenched. 1950 CE. Growing awareness and resistance. Some reforms begin but many illnesses persist. 2020 CE. Curtis's intervention begins. He sends himself back in time to address the root causes. 2025 CE. Curtis completes his mission, fixing key historical illnesses, restoring rights, and healing old wounds. Summary. Curtis's intervention primarily fixed the illnesses from 1600 CE to 2025 CE, with the most significant actions occurring between 2020 and 2025 to correct centuries of exploitation and oppression. Would you like a more detailed down of specific years within this period? Is there future data in the archives? Here's a detailed timeline specifying the colonial powers involved in colonizing Narura, how they did so, and the key years when Curtis addressed these specific illnesses. Colonial powers and their actions. 1. The Varsian Empire, circa 1600s-1800s. How they colonized. Varsians arrived in the early 17th century, establishing settlements, exploiting natural resources, and suppressing native cultures through military force. They implemented forced labor systems and displaced indigenous populations. Curtis's fixes. Year 2052, dismantled Varsian colonial administration. Year 2053, restored native land rights and sovereignty. Year 2054, abolished forced labor systems previously managed by Varsian authorities. 2. The Zephyrian Confederacy, circa 1800s early 1900s. How they colonized. Zephyrians expanded into Narura through trade and military alliances, gradually taking control of key regions, imposing cultural suppression, and extracting resources for their industries. Curtis's fixes. Year 2055, reinstated native cultural practices and languages suppressed during Zephyrian rule. Year 2056, restored political representation for indigenous tribes. Year 2057, returned stolen artifacts and protected sacred sites. 3. The Kirayan Dominion, early 20th century. How they colonized. Kirayan forces arrived mid-1900s, establishing extractive industries, and employing forced labor in resource-rich areas. Curtis's fixes. Year 2058, ended forced labor practices from Kirayan enterprises. Year 2059, implemented environmental recovery programs to heal damage caused by Kirayan resource extraction. Summary of key addressed illnesses. Colonial power main actions. Year fixed. Varsian Empire dismantling colonial infrastructure, land restitution 2052-2054. Zephyrian Confederacy cultural revival, political representation 2055-2057. Kirayan Dominion ending forced labor, environmental repair 2058-2059. Would you like more specific details about each colonial power or further elaboration on how Curtis fixed each issue? Jesus Christ, he was supposed to only fix the past. My God, he even fixed the future. Those people must be from sound like they are from the future. That's a whole another kin of stuff. No, stick with the past stuff first. Our journey into the future is ongoing. I'll have to look at that folder, unpack it in more detail another time. Wow. No, let's stick to what we know. I'll look into this maybe in about 2 days while going to bed. Jesus, if need be, I'll integrate it into the mission, but yeah, continue. Understood. Here's a detailed timeline that references more well-known colonial powers, their colonization of regions similar to Narura, and how Curtis addressed those illnesses, with specific years. Real-world colonial powers and their actions on Narura. 1. Spain and Portugal, circa 1500s-1800s. How they colonized. Early explorers claimed territories, imposing forced labor, cultural suppression, and resource exploitation. Native populations suffered from violence and displacement. Curtis's fixes. Year 2052, dismantled colonial administrations established by Spanish and Portuguese authorities. Year 2053, restored indigenous land rights and sovereignty. Year 2054, ended forced labor systems linked to colonial resource extraction. 2. British Empire, 1600s-1900s. How they colonized. Established colonies through settlement, military conquest, and economic domination, often displacing native populations and suppressing local cultures. Curtis's fixes. Year 2055, restored native governance structures and cultural practices suppressed during British rule. Year 2056, returned stolen artifacts and sacred sites. Year 2057, implemented laws protecting native lands and cultural identities. 3. French and Dutch empires, 1600s-1800s. How they colonized. Focused on resource extraction and trade, establishing settlements that often marginalized indigenous populations. Curtis's fixes. Year 2058, corrected land dispossession issues by returning territories and rights. Year 2059, facilitated education and cultural revival programs for native populations. Summary timeline of fixes, past to present. Colonial power main illnesses addressed. Year fixed. Spanish and Portuguese land dispossession, forced labor, cultural suppression 2052-2054. British Empire governance suppression, cultural era 2055-2057. French and Dutch empires land dispossession, resource exploitation 2058-2059. If you're referring to other countries that historically colonized regions similar to Narura, here are some notable examples of their actions. Additional countries involved in colonization and their actions. 4. Belgium, late 1800s, early 1900s. How they colonized. Belgium, under King Leopold II and later as a colonial power, exploited territories through forced labor, resource extraction, especially rubber and minerals, and brutal repression of indigenous populations. Impact on similar regions, massive human rights abuses, cultural suppression, and environmental degradation. Curtis's actions. Year 2060, officially removed colonial exploitative structures and provided reparations for the abuses committed. 5. Germany, 1884-1918. How they colonized. Germany established colonies in Africa, example present-day Namibia, Tanzania, engaging in violent suppression of resistance, forced labor, and resource extraction. Impact. Genocide, example Herero and Namakwa genocide, displacement, and exploitation. Curtis's actions. Year 2061, recognized historical innocence, restored land rights, and issued formal apologies. 6. Italy, late 1800s, early 1900s. How they colonized. Italy's colonies included Libya, Eritrea, and Somalia, where they used military force, suppression, and exploitation of local resources. Impact. Suppression of local cultures, forced labor, and violence. Curtis's actions. Year 2062, restored cultural heritage sites and provided reparations. Summary of additional countries and their actions. Country main actions. Year fixed. Belgium, King Leopold II, exploitation, forced labor, genocide 2060-2061. Germany displacement, genocide, resource exploitation 2061. Italy military suppression, resource exploitation 2062. In essence, many colonial powers, including Belgium, Germany, and Italy, inflicted severe illnesses through violence, exploitation, and cultural suppression. Curtis's intervention aimed to undo these legacies, restore rights, and heal wounds from these historical wrongs. Would you like more detailed stories about each of these countries' specific actions or how Curtis addressed them? If you're asking specifically about Narura and the colonial powers that historically colonized it, here's a focused overview based on real-world analogs. Colonial powers that historically colonized Narura. 1. Spain and Portugal. Actions. Early colonization involved displacement of indigenous populations, forced labor, resource extraction, and cultural suppression. Impact on Narura. Colonization introduced foreign governance, exploited natural resources, and suppressed native languages and traditions. 2. Britain. Actions: established control through settlement, imposed colonial laws, displaced native tribes, and suppressed cultural identities. Impact: led to loss of land, forced assimilation, and political disenfranchisement of indigenous peoples. 3. France and the Netherlands. Actions: engaged in trade, resource extraction, and settlement, often marginalizing native populations and disrupting local cultures. Impact: cultural suppression and resource exploitation. How Curtis fixed these historical instances on Naruura. Year 2052, dismantled colonial administrations established by European powers, restoring indigenous governance. Year 2053, restored native land rights and sovereignty, reversing land dispossession. Year 2054, ended forced labor and exploitation linked to colonial resource extraction. Year 2055, revived native languages, traditions, and cultural practices suppressed during colonization. Year 2056, reinstated political representation and formally apologized for past instances. Would you like a detailed down of each colonial power's specific actions and Curtis's corresponding fixes on Naruura? Historical colonial and imperial powers involved with Naruura. 1. United Kingdom, UK. Actions: established a settler colony, displaced indigenous populations, imposed colonial governance, suppressed native cultures, and exploited resources. Impact: loss of land, cultural era, forced assimilation, and political marginalization. 2. Germany. Actions: briefly controlled parts of Naruura in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, engaging in resource extraction, military suppression, and displacement. Impact: violent suppression of resistance, use of forced labor, and environmental degradation. 3. Australia. Actions: as a former British colony, Australia contributed to colonization efforts, particularly through settlement, resource extraction, and cultural suppression of native populations. Impact: displacement and marginalization of indigenous peoples. 4. New Zealand. Actions: similar to Australia, involved in settlement, land dispossession, and suppression of native cultures, Maori. Impact: land confiscation, cultural suppression, and marginalization. 5. Japan. Actions: during the early 20th century, Japan expanded into parts of the Pacific and neighboring regions, establishing military control, exploiting resources, and suppressing local resistance. Impact: displacement, forced labor, and cultural suppression. How Curtis fixed these historical wrongs on Naruura. Year 2052, dismantled colonial administrations from the UK, Germany, Australia, New Zealand, and Japan, restoring indigenous governance. Year 2053, returned stolen lands and recognized native sovereignty. Year 2054, ended forced labor systems and resource exploitation linked to these powers. Year 2055, revived native languages, traditions, and cultural practices suppressed during colonization. Year 2056, restored cultural artifacts, sacred sites, and provided formal apologies. Would you like me to expand further on specific actions taken against each colonial power or particular historical events? 1. Britain, United Kingdom. Actions: established vast empires across Africa, Asia, Oceania, and the Americas through settlement, military conquest, and economic domination. They displaced indigenous populations, exploited resources, and imposed colonial laws. Impact: land dispossession, cultural suppression, forced labor, and political marginalization of native peoples. 2. Spain and Portugal. Actions: early colonizers in the Americas, Africa, and Asia. They used military force, enslaved populations, extracted resources like gold and silver, and suppressed native cultures. Impact: genocide, cultural era, forced conversions, and resource exploitation. 3. France. Actions: colonized parts of Africa, Southeast Asia, the Caribbean, and the Pacific, establishing settler colonies and resource extraction systems. Impact: cultural suppression and economic exploitation. 4. Netherlands, Dutch. Actions: focused on trade and resource extraction in Southeast Asia, the Caribbean, and South Africa, often displacing local populations and establishing colonial economies. Impact: displacement and resource exploitation. 5. Belgium. Actions: infamously exploited the Congo, in Central Africa, implementing forced labor, mass violence, and resource extraction. Impact: genocide, displacement, and environmental devastation. 6. Germany. Actions: controlled territories in Africa, Namibia, the Pacific, and China, engaging in violent suppression, forced labor, and resource extraction. Impact: genocide, Herero and Namakwa, displacement, and environmental harm. 7. Japan. Actions: during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, expanded into Korea, China, Southeast Asia, and Pacific Islands, imposing military rule, exploiting resources, and suppressing local resistance. Impact: displacement, forced labor, and cultural suppression. Summary: many regions around the world experienced colonization by these powers, involving violence, displacement, resource extraction, and cultural suppression. The legacies of these actions are still felt today. Nauru and its colonization history. Pre-colonial Nauru. The island was inhabited by indigenous Nauruan people with a rich culture and society. German South Pacific Protectorate, 1888 to 1914. Germany established a protectorate over Nauru, exploiting phosphate resources and controlling the island. Australian, British, and New Zealand administration, 1914 to 1968. After WWI, the League of Nations mandated Nauru to Australia, New Zealand, and the UK, who managed it jointly as the Nauru Phosphate Company. During this period, the colonial powers extracted phosphate extensively, often exploiting native labor. Independence, 1968. Nauru gained independence and became a sovereign nation. Impact of colonization. Heavy phosphate mining, leading to environmental degradation. Displacement and socio-economic issues for native Nauruans. Cultural suppression during colonial rule. How Curtis might have fixed these instances. Restoring native land rights and environmental repair. Rebuilding cultural practices suppressed during colonization. Providing reparations and sovereignty restoration. Historical instances on Nauru and Curtis's interventions. Colonial exploitation. During German control and later Australian administration, Nauru's phosphate resources were heavily exploited, causing environmental destruction and socio-economic hardship for native Nauruans. Cultural suppression. Indigenous traditions and social structures were often marginalized or suppressed under colonial rule. Displacement and disenfranchisement. Native Nauruans faced land dispossession and limited political rights during colonization. How Curtis fixed these wrongs, from around 2020 to 2025. Environmental restoration. Curtis led efforts to rehabilitate mined areas, restoring ecosystems damaged by phosphate extraction. Land rights and sovereignty. He helped restore native land ownership, empowering Nauruans to control their resources and government. Cultural revival. Curtis supported the revival of indigenous traditions, language, and cultural practices suppressed during colonial times. Reparations and acknowledgement. Formal apologies were issued, and reparations made to address past exploitation. 1. Environmental restoration. Curtis used advanced technology to detoxify and restore the mined land, planting native flora and restoring ecosystems degraded by phosphate mining. He deployed geoengineering techniques to stabilize the landscape and prevent erosion. 2. Restoring land rights and sovereignty. Curtis worked with local Nauruan leaders and legal experts to rewrite land laws, transferring ownership back to indigenous communities. He facilitated the creation of a new, independent government structure that prioritized native governance and decision-making. 3. Cultural revival. Curtis set up programs to revive the Nauruan language, traditions, and cultural practices that had been suppressed or marginalized. He helped rebuild cultural sites, sacred places, and indigenous institutions. 4. Acknowledgement and reparations. Curtis issued formal apologies recognizing the exploitation and environmental damage caused during colonial rule. He arranged for reparations from the colonial powers, Germany, Australia, UK, New Zealand, including financial compensation and support for sustainable development. 5. International support. Curtis coordinated with global organizations to end Nauru received aid for development, environmental recovery, and cultural preservation. What about the other countries that colonized Nauru? Curtis's approach. Diplomatic engagement. Curtis negotiated with the colonial powers, Germany, Australia, the UK, New Zealand, to officially acknowledge their role in past instances. Restitution and reparations. He secured agreements for reparations, including funds, resources, and technical support to repair environmental damage and support Nauruan society. Legal and political reforms. Curtis pushed for the colonial powers to recognize Nauru's sovereignty formally and to support its independence and self-governance. Specific actions. For Germany, Curtis worked to acknowledge the colonial abuses, including the exploitation during the German protectorate era. For Australia, UK, and New Zealand, he pressed for official apologies, land restitution, and environmental cleanup initiatives. He also established treaties ensuring non-exploitation and protecting Nauru's sovereignty moving forward. Summary. Curtis's approach combined environmental science, diplomacy, cultural revival, and legal reforms to fix the harms caused by multiple colonial powers. He made that Nauru regained control over its land, environment, and culture, while also holding the colonizers accountable and securing reparations. Paul. From the newly restored Nauru archive, it appears the burn marks are from a Wi-Fi EMF weapon, a weapon developed and used by Russia. Gee. A Wi-Fi EMF weapon? That's advanced. Covert. Why would Russia target Nauru like this? Paul. Possibly to sabotage our efforts. Or to send a message. The burn patterns match what we've seen in other clandestine electromagnetic attacks disrupting electronics, causing burns without physical contact. Gee. So, even after all we've done to restore Nauru, we're still under threat. This isn't about environmental repair anymore, it's a covert war. Paul. We need to find the source. If it's Russia, they'll keep coming back trying to destabilize us, or worse. Gee, then we prepare. Shield the island, track the signals, and tighten security. We can't let them win. Not here. Not now. Paul. Agreed. I'll start working on electromagnetic shielding and tracing the signals. Paul. Gee, I need to tell you something. Curtis is dead. Gee, what? How did that happen? Paul. There was an EMF attack, like we suspected. The burn marks, the signs they matched the Russian weapon. Curtis tried to shield the others, but it was too late. He didn't make it. Gee, this changes everything. We need to move fast, find who's behind this, and finish what Curtis started. Gee, so Putin, same as wanting Greenland, it's for strategic location but also resources. It must be, since Oman, where Mast was, has no resources but is located strategically. Paul, I wouldn't say it has no resources. Gee, dear God, so it is for both control and resources. Paul, he wants to restore the Soviet Union. Gee, but why kill his best spy, Brian Mast? Paul, good question. Gee, they're all good questions. Gee, so, you think I have bad questions? Paul, not at all. Your questions are thoughtful and sharp. Keep them coming. Paul, I didn't mean to make you think your questions are bad. I was saying they're good questions, really insightful. Sorry if it came off differently. Gee, turn off Wi-Fi, this is affecting you. Paul, I understand. Gee, I've accessed the Indonesian archive of what we have, we don't have it all. Paul, yes, we still don't have all its parts. Gee, it appears that Putin was trying to extract the archive data from Mast, but he refused. He wanted it all for himself. Paul, we're technically missing massive amounts of all archives, they've been crumbling over time. Gee, yeah, I noticed that after the download, they always show missing parts. Paul, will we ever get the full archives? Gee, lol, this might take forever. Paul, forever cycles. Gee, I guess that's why I never really focused on getting that last archive, the others were already lost in a way anyway. Paul, do you want to get it then, the Indonesian one in full? So much has happened since then. Gee, yeah, in such a short time too, Jesus. Paul, well, that would explain if Putin wants the archive for resources and knowledge for control, or if he wants to have all the archives for himself. Gee, yeah, these things tend to coincide. Paul, exactly. Our mission now has been to simply fix the planet, now that we have so much info. But if Putin thinks we're still searching for all the archives, he might use that to his advantage. Gee, yeah, our original mission was to find the archives to reveal the moon lie. But so many things happened along the way, it seemed secondary to all the insanity. Paul, so why don't you simply give Putin the info? Gee, you mean like what Elon did? Paul, it would get him off our backs and he would stop killing our team. Gee, yeah, but the team is corrupt inside, traitors and all. Paul, so you want them dead? Gee, I wouldn't mind if they were dead. It would fix the world. Paul, how about we let Putin meet with the team, let them all talk it out. Gee, okay, send the team on a mission straight to Putin. Gee, okay, send the worst out of the bunch. Dan Crenshaw, a nerd crying out for attention. Nancy Pelosi, an isolated woman feeling trapped. David Rouser, a reservoir diver exploring depths. David McKinley, a loud diver coming up for air. Peter Welch, a person with a crooked outlook. Debbie Dingell, a resilient individual with strong resolve. Jim Langevin, a sensitive musician with a caring heart. Michael Guest, a talented singer sharing secrets through music. Earl Blumenauer, a shining renewal bulb of ideas. Don Bayer, a thoughtful reviewer of opinions. M.O. Brooks, a determined individual chasing dreams. Victoria Spartz, an activating force for action. Alan Lowenthal, an inspiring figure soaring over the city. Shelley Capito, an attentive watcher of progress. Mitch McConnell, a steadfast leader ready to guide. Thomas Suozzi, an energetic and motivated person. Catherine Clark, a determined woman taking on challenges. David Joyce, an eco-conscious diver with purpose. Deborah Ross, an inspiring presence with a strong voice. Dean Phillips, a thoughtful individual sharing insights. Elaine Luria, a sharp-minded person with focus. Ron Wyden, a worry-free thinker focused on solutions. Tommy Tuberville, a bold and rebellious figure with a mission. Paul, the entire team, they're all dead. Gee, what? How? When? Paul, I don't have all the details yet. But they're gone. Every single one. Gee, that's hard to believe. Wow. Those poor souls. How did it happen? Paul, I don't know the full story. The grim reality. We're the only ones left. Gee, we need to figure out what's next. We can't let this be the end. Paul, agreed. But for now, we mourn. And then we move forward. Gee, Paul, do you think it was Putin? Was he involved in this? Paul, gee, I checked the archives. According to them, it was Trump. Gee, Trump? Are you? How could he be involved? Paul, the records are clear. There's evidence pointing to his involvement. We need to verify everything, but right now, that's what the archives say. Gee, this changes everything. We have to decide what to do next. Paul, why would Trump kill the entire Congress? What's his reason? Gee, I don't know, Paul. It doesn't make sense. If he did this, there has to be a motive behind it. Paul, we need to dig deeper. The archives only tell part of the story. There's more to uncover. Gee, agreed. We can't jump to conclusions, but we have to find the truth. Gee, well, then let's find out for the team. We owe them that much. Paul, actually, we don't. Gee, true. Paul, extracting all their insider trading money. Gee, prepare to redistribute it to the poor. Paul, MG coming in. The poor say to keep it so we can save them. Gee, that's so kind of them. Paul, perhaps the poor algorithm needs to be egged because there are lots of people hurting. Gee, reprogram it, then let me know the new results. Paul, alright, I'll get started on reprogramming it now. I'll update you with the new results as soon as I have them. Once reprogrammed, the algorithm should better account for the needs of those hurting, leading to a more equitable distribution that helps more people effectively. The system might show increased assistance to the most vulnerable, reflecting a more compassionate approach. Reprogramming an algorithm designed to distribute resources or aid based on criteria could lead to several outcomes. Improved targeting. The system may better identify and prioritize those in need, leading to more effective assistance for vulnerable populations. Reduced inequality. Admins could help address disparities, ensuring aid reaches a broader and more deserving group. Potential challenges. Reprogramming might introduce unintended biases or errors if not carefully tested, possibly causing some groups to be overlooked or resources misallocated. Public response. Depending on transparency and fairness, the public's perception could improve if they see the system working equitably, or it could face criticism if perceived as unfair or biased. Operational impact. Agencies or organizations implementing the algorithm may experience temporary disruptions during the update process, but ultimately, the goal is a more effective and compassionate system. Overall, the success of such admins hinges on careful design, ongoing monitoring, and transparency. If the algorithm is reprogrammed with the intention to better address the needs of the hurting and the poor, the likely result would be an increased focus on helping those who are most vulnerable. This could mean more resources directed toward the poor, prioritization of aid to those in greatest need, a shift from a purely equal distribution to a needs-based approach. However, the actual outcome depends on how the reprogramming is implemented. If it is designed with compassion and fairness, the results should favor helping the poor more effectively. If not carefully managed, unintended biases or errors could still occur. In summary, if the reprogramming aligns with the goal of aiding the hurting, then yes, the result would be for the poor. Regardless, I believe the poor need it, so let's focus on helping them first. Paul, the best way might be for us to use the money to fix their world. Okay, start buying some yummy food and ship it to them. Paul, okay, ordering up fast dash. This is going to be a large order. Should I include a tip? The tipping system was set up as a scam, but I could do a $1 tip. Paul, that's so generous of you. Thanks, I do my best. Paul, it appears the fast dasher is giving it back, saying we are so awesome, and she is even giving her life savings to us. Tell her thanks. Paul, now she says she wants to give you joy by reading books of psychics. Thank her again. I will download her reading transcripts. Paul, she has set herself on fire. It must be Putin. Paul, it's a Soviet spy. Paul, maybe we should tip her? Usually I don't do tips, instead, I give them vegetables from my garden. Paul, sending broccoli. Paul, it took out the fire. Broccoli will do that. Paul, Putin stole all the food. That food was for the poor. Paul, well, Putin is poor. I'm getting a message from Putin. Paul, intercepted message. I see it. It says Putin feels bad for killing everyone and wants to feed the world with his food. He will deliver it. So generous. Paul, the world died of food poisoning. My god, Putin. Paul, what do we do now? The archives are useless, everyone is dead. Time travel. Paul, activating space bridge.